Right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Here we are. This is our second live stream webinar that we have done with the Tech Modernization Fund. Welcome here. This is DigitalGov University here at GSA, where we work on and bring some of the greatest ideas, projects, programs, and try to demystify them and make them available to people around government. Now, as a lot of you know, we switched this to 100% live stream, and now we have a packed room full of people as well, some even in Capitals jerseys and stuff like that. We thought that a lot of people might not even be awake this morning after the game. So thank you so much for joining us. And again, so there's been a lot of news going on with the Tech Modernization Fund. We've done a lot of work outreaching to agencies to demystify some of the processes, because this is such a new thing and a new approach. It's hard to wrap your head around. So what we wanted to do is have a workshop and make it so that people could come and work directly with Liz's team to get questions answered, to float ideas on proposals, what works, what doesn't, and remove any barriers that there are to fully understanding this. That being said, isn't there some news that's probably going to be talked about as well, probably?
Yes, Justin, we have some very exciting news, which is that yesterday, Federal CIO Suzette Kent announced our first 3 awards from the Technology Modernization Fund. We are funding 3 projects at 3 different departments: the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and then also the Department of Energy. And so we've awarded $45 million, but that still leaves $55
About to say, is there any left for the people in this room here?
There's still funding for projects. The board is still looking for new initiatives to review, and so keep those proposals coming in.
Awesome. And that really is what kind of brings us here today. And again, thank you so much, everyone who showed up in person for this as well as online. Because a lot of the work we do in the Emerging Citizen Technology Program is focused on looking at the ways that things like artificial intelligence, robotic process automation can be used for essentially what's the vision of TMF, which is better updated systems that deliver better mission impact and cost savings for the American people, which is the crux of exactly what our mission is. So it's been so fun working with you on this and to be able to support these efforts.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciate all you have done to help support this new initiative. The board has said specifically they're looking for projects that leverage emerging technologies. And so it has been so great to partner with you in this community to sort of find ways to bring those proposals to the board and help implement them across government.
Yeah, because it sounds easy, but Shakespeare said the path to true love never did run smooth. And there's a lot of questions here. And that's obviously evidenced by the fact that we have so many people here this morning, as well as signed up online. So let's do a little bit of ground rules and set expectations of what's going to happen today and what's going to happen during this webinar. The first thing, of course, is we're going to go through and you're going to present. And aren't you going to go pretty much line by line through the form?
Right. So we're going to share a little bit about the initial project proposal template and go through each of the questions that you have to respond to for the board and talk about some ways you could think about filling out those sections in a way that really highlights the benefits of your proposal and makes that case to the board that will get you through to the next round.
Yeah, because, you know, the #1 question that we've been getting from agencies and companies on this is, but what does a good proposal look like? What are you actually looking for in this? So you're going to walk us through the form and actually discuss?
Exactly. That's our plan for today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And also, we have it where if you're a federal agency, and obviously everybody who's in this room right now who came, we're going to be able to schedule individual personal consultations with the Technology Modernization Fund team, correct?
Yes. We're very excited to work directly with project teams to answer their questions and discuss their proposals.
All right. So by that time, and that'll start happening in about an hour. So if you're out there and you're a federal agency, please email emergingtech@gsa.gov, send your contact info, and we're going to be scheduling. And today you can get that consultation with the Technology Modernization Fund team. That being said, it doesn't just have to be today because this is an ongoing process.
That's true. If today doesn't work for your schedule or we fill up all our slots, we would be happy to meet with you at another time that works for you.
Everyone in the room, don't worry, you'll be taken care of for showing up. So too, also, and there's a lot of people who are very new to this. Right. And so we have inside the screen for the live stream questions that you can ask. Now, if you're a federal agency, a federal team working on a proposal, please load up your questions, because there's one thing that Liz and her team loves to do. It's answer questions on this.
That's so true.
And that being said, because we know that there's a lot of interest out there, and this is a live stream, so if you're specifically press who are trying to spread the word about what's going on with this, and you have questions for us, please just send them to press@gsa.gov, and they will be on hand to help you with that. So again, if you're a federal agency working on a federal proposal, please go ahead and send it. If you want an interview for the press or something, don't use the chat screen for it, and please just go press@gsa.gov. So that being said, I think we're about ready to get going, and I'm actually told that by the end of the hour, we'll be having a special guest, perhaps.
Yes, we're very hopeful that Alan Thomas, the Federal Acquisition Service Commissioner, who is also a member of the Technology Modernization Board, will be joining us for a short discussion on his perspectives on what agencies should be thinking about as they develop their proposals.
Best morning ever.
I know.
All right, so why don't we get going? Take it away, Liz.
Thank you. And so before we get going, I want to set the stage by discussing what the Technology Modernization Fund is for anybody who has missed my 15 different road shows. I always like to start off with an overview of our program. And so here's how the TMF works. Agencies submit modernization proposals, which are reviewed by the Technology Modernization Board, chaired by the Federal CIO, Suzette Kent. And then that Technology Modernization Board selects the proposals with the greatest impact, strongest business case, and highest probability of success for upfront funding from the TMF. The funding is issued to the receiving agency in an incremental manner and tied to performance against previously established targets and milestones. And then as the agency is completing their project, technical experts provide hands-on support to that agency project team, including resources from the U.S. Digital Service and across GSA. And this ensures that the project has the resources that it needs to be successful. Then agencies repay the Technology Modernization Fund over a period of years, which drives accountability for the project and enables our Technology Modernization Fund to be self-sustaining, continually reinvesting resources in future projects. All right, in our effort today, the Technology Modernization Fund is one way to help modernize legacy systems and move agencies to more secure modern platforms. As I mentioned, we received $100 million for upfront funding for modernization projects, and while we've made our first 3 awards, there's still more money on the table. And the people at this event see every day where outdated or legacy IT is holding back mission performance. As I shared, the board is specifically interested in projects that leverage emerging technologies. And so our effort today is to work with you all, the emerging technology community, to help surface proposals that leverage emerging technologies and really move the government forward. I want to share a little bit about the proposal process. There are 2 rounds of project review before a proposal can be awarded funding. The first is the initial project proposal, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It's a 2 to 3 page overview of your project using a standard template. And then if the board likes what it sees in your initial project proposal, your project will move on to the full project proposal stage, which includes a longer narrative response using a standard template, a financial workbook, also standardized, and then my favorite part, an in-person pitch to the board.
I don't mean to interrupt, but one quick question, because it constantly comes up.
Yeah.
So you're saying the first stage is people just have to put together like a 2-page proposal that you're about to walk through, and that's that first hurdle?
Exactly. It's just 5 short questions about your idea and your project approach that you get into the board for their initial review. And then if they like what they see, they'll move it on to the next round. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because what we want agencies to know is that you don't have to have all the answers completed when you submit your initial project proposal. And you don't have to share every detail either, because if you get past that first stage and into the second round, you're going to be able to show the board a lot more detail on your project.
And also be able to work with you on what those details could be and should be.
Exactly. We've brought together a team with expertise across acquisition and technology solutions. So we're ready to help agencies in refining that project approach to make it something that is going to be really great. And so I would say one thing I hope to emphasize in this workshop today is that your initial project proposal needs to really sell your project in a way that intrigues the board, gets them interested, and outlines enough of your approach that they feel like you know what you're talking about. And so there's other places where you'll be able to provide more information on your technical solution, more information on the financial information for your project, but you got to get to that next round.
How long is that process actually? So when you, and just to ask another question is, are we talking about like 6 months? Like when someone submits a 2-page proposal, how long does it take to get feedback?
That's a really great question. What we're working to do is when an initial project proposal comes in from an agency, our team, as well as the Office of Management and Budget, will give it a quick review. And if we see anything where we think that the board will immediately have a question or want some more information, we'll work with that agency to include that in a revision to their initial project proposal submission so that it's ready to go before the board. Now, we've usually been able to bring proposals before the board within the month that they were submitted, and maybe even within a week or two. And we are working to speed up our notifications of the agencies because we know that people are so excited to hear about how their project is done, but that can be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks as well.
That's still pretty short.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of it, but working every day to make it even better. All right, and so I want to share a little bit about the initial project proposal before we get into the nitty-gritty of the different sections. So like I mentioned, the initial project proposal is what gets your project to the next round. So in this document, you want to make it clear to the board what the project will deliver in terms of mission performance and citizen impact. You want to give a solid overview of your technical solution and project financials, but you don't have to have every detail in this document. And when you're doing your internal review, think like a board member. And so I mean this on a bunch of different levels. One, the board members might not be familiar with your agency or your program. And so think about any acronyms, jargon, or little known information that someone who's not as familiar with your program wouldn't know.
Wait, acronyms, jargon, and little known information. I thought that was the federal government.
Well, I think that what I want to share is don't forget that some people will need a little bit of explanation about your program and maybe about your systems as well, and spell out those acronyms so we know what you're talking about. Also, think like a board member in terms of what you as an executive would expect to get as a work product. So those little things like font, spelling, grammar, all those things count too. And finally, think like a board member in terms of what the board has said that they've been looking for. They've been looking for projects that deliver to the citizen, that deliver on the mission. They're looking for projects that can deliver progress within the first year, and they are continuously looking for projects that leverage emerging technologies, and also are very interested in common platforms or shared solutions. And also just in general, projects that have a nugget of a lesson for other agencies that are looking for ideas for how to move their agency forward as well. So the idea that you would be able to reuse either the technical solution or just the approach, maybe even the change management approach, are important things to include for the board.
I think that's really interesting because a lot of times when we're working with agencies, like there'll be 8 agencies that think they're alone and unique in a situation, but they all, there's slight variations, but they're looking for the same thing. We see that with contact center modernization, other things. And so like that shared services approach could really be exemplified through this model.
And so for the 3 projects that we have awarded, we're very excited that they will have some of those lessons for other agencies, and looking for future projects to have that same approach.
Okay.
All right. And now let's get into, let's talk about OMB and what they have provided to help you guys out with this process as well. So in OMB Memorandum 1812, which was the memorandum that gave the guidance for how to implement the Modernizing Government Technology Act, they included a document that I like a whole lot. It's called Appendix B, and it's helpful guidance for agencies as they develop initial project proposals. And so they provided these categories for consideration that they recommend agencies be thinking about as they develop this proposal. And in their guidance, they say, look, every proposal might not have these elements, but they are worth thinking about as you develop your proposal. One of them aligns to something I've already shared. user impact and expected outcomes. What will this proposal deliver to your agency in terms of citizen impact and mission performance? Security impact, so important right now for people to be thinking about the way that we secure our data, especially PII, personally identifiable information. And so if your project has a security impact, make sure you are highlighting that in your proposal. In addition, I would say, even if you don't have a security component of your project, it's likely you would get a question on what you're doing to protect data or enhance data protection. And so it's worth thinking about how your project supports that effort as well. Agency sponsorship and strength of team. The board is very interested in seeing projects that have support at the highest levels of the agency, because they know that's one of the ways for a project to be successful is strong agency sponsorship. In addition, they are very interested in who's on the team, what is their background, and what is their experience, and do we have a team put together that's going to be able to deliver on that project. They're also interested in the project execution strategy and the measures of success. That goes back to the incremental transfers tied to milestones structure for the way the funding goes to the agency. And so they want to see that the agency has been thinking about the way that they can show progress on their project so they can get that next incremental transfer. And they want to know how the agency is planning to monitor how the project is going and seeing if it is delivering on the business case. My favorite part, being a former member of GSA's budget team, expected cost savings, lasting financial impact, and ability to repay the TMF. You know, the TMF is almost like a lending program, and so we're very much interested in making sure that this fund will last for a long time and be able to fund lots of agency projects. And so one of the ways that we want to support that is by ensuring the projects have a way to pay back the fund. And the easiest way to do that is ensuring that they do have those cost savings that the agency can use to repay the fund. And so that's another area where we know agencies have a lot of questions, and where talking about the specifics of a particular project might be a really good way to answer those questions, because every project is a little bit different, and we want to make sure we're giving advice tailored to the agency's specific situation.
And we're going to break that down a little bit more later, aren't we?
Yes, yeah, we'll talk about that later on when we go through the template.
Awesome.
And then finally, delivering on the mission of the Technology Modernization Fund, the reduction of outdated and insecure systems and moving them to modern scalable platforms that deliver common solutions and reuse opportunities. So when Congress designed this program, that was what was on their mind, that agencies had these outdated legacy systems, but it was very difficult for them to do the modernization effort because of the way the costs came in. And so making sure that your project has that perspective that it is modernizing a legacy system and moving it to a common platform is really important to ensure that it aligns to the way that the program was designed to operate. And then, as we mentioned before, those common solutions and reuse opportunities ensure that that investment that we make in the project pays bigger dividends to the larger federal government in terms of reuse opportunities, those playbooks, those acquisition technical solutions. All of those things are so important for moving government forward, even outside of Technology Modernization Fund. All right, now the moment you've been waiting for, we'll go into our template. And so we have a few copies here in the room, and then I'm hoping people have it on the line as well. You can also find it on the OMB website. It's just a 1-2-page Word document right out there.
So just to clarify again, if anybody in the room during this has any questions, you are free to ask. And that goes for anybody online as well, working on a proposal, that if you want to go into the live chat, I've got it right here in front of me. And we will answer these questions through there, because what we really want is, by the end of this, there to be really no questions or trepidation about what you're going to find in that initial 2-page proposal, so you can just focus your efforts on putting together the best proposals you possibly can. So that being said, we might get interrupted a lot with the questions, but that's what we're here for, and that's the workshop portion.
Yeah, so that's great. Well, thank you. And so starting off with the top of the document is the general information section. And that gives the board and our PMO an overview of your project and who from your agency has been working on it. So the section includes the project name, the sponsoring agency, the project sponsor name and title and email, and the CIO sponsor name, title, and email, and CFO name, title, and email. And so we've gotten a lot of questions from folks about who should be that project sponsor, who should be that CIO sponsor, who should be that CFO sponsor. And so what I would say is, for your agency, think about who you can get in your corner on this project and aim as high as you can get. And what is most important for us as we review these proposals, especially in the PMO, is to know that you have actually been working with your CIO shop and your CFO shop on your proposal. And so we have seen a lot of proposals where the project sponsor has been a high-level executive, where the CIO sponsor has been the CIO, him or herself, and where the CFO sponsor has been the actual CFO of that agency or department. However, we've also seen proposals that are a couple levels down. And so it's all about who you've got in your corner, who's supporting this project, and making sure that you are integrating this proposal into the larger efforts at your agency, both technical and financial.
So it has to be interoperable is what you're saying.
Right. So you need to be connected into your larger agency efforts and ensure that you've got that buy-in from other parts to make your project a success. Any questions?
No questions yet. I think people are shocked by the alliteration on that slide. It was pretty heavy for a Friday morning.
Yeah. Okay. And then section 1. This is where you describe why this project needs to be done and how it will help your agency better serve its mission and the American people. And so what I would recommend to teams here is to think about in this section really talking about the current state and the future state, and focusing on where your agency has this struggle right now or this opportunity to improve, and what the world will look like after you complete that project. And there are other sections in the document where you can get more into your technical solution. And so I would recommend saving that discussion for later sections and really bringing that citizen-facing story up front. And as I've mentioned in previous conversations that we've had, you know, it's very easy to tell the citizen-facing story for a citizen-facing platform, but it's a little bit harder for a cloud email migration or a database migration. But that story is always there because we're pursuing those projects because they help the agency use its resources in a more productive way or help deliver on the mission better. And we just need to think about that extra step and make it clear to the board. And I would recommend bringing it right up into this section so it's one of the first things they read about your project.
Oh, we do have a question in the back of the room.
All right.
Here, actually, Emma, do you want to be in charge of mic duty?
I actually was somewhat intimidated by the fact that that actual description says no more than 1 to 3 sentences. Is there any problem with writing more than that? Because I think the business case might take more than just 3 sentences to make.
Well, they could possibly use emoji.
Yeah, right. All emojis. I would say that's a really good point. And so they give the suggested document length of 2 to 3 pages. And if you want to reallocate some of the space in that document to ensure that you're able to make that story, I would say that's a good idea. And all of the length requirements are more suggestions. Don't send a treatise, please. But, you know, if it's 2.5 pages, we'll still take it. Thanks. All right. Thank you.
No, okay. Not yet.
All right.
People are just saying good morning online right now.
Good morning to you. All right. Section 2. Section 2, I mentioned I used to work in GSA's budget office. So section 2 is my favorite, where you describe the project's financials. How much money do you need for the project and how do you intend to pay it back? And so this is a really important project for you to be thinking, part of the project for you to be thinking about, because in addition to the resources from the TMF, you might also have agency-based resources, and we want to know what that combined total is. We also want to know what those out-year perspectives will look like, where you're hopefully generating those savings that will allow payback. But if that's not part of your business case, we want to know what is your plan for repaying the TMF. And so here, I would say, give a good overview, but you don't have to have every question answered and you don't have to go a lot into depth. Just ensure that everyone knows that you know what you're planning to spend the money on, you know about how much you need, and you have a plan to pay it back.
Can people ask you questions directly on that too in a consultation?
Of course.
By emailing for that?
Yes, and on this one as well, our friends at OMB have provided some helpful guidance on their website, specifically about ways to think about the payback. And so what they consider the default reimbursement mechanism is offsets within the agency budget. So that could be contract reductions, decommissioning of systems, deferred low priority maintenance, and then those reductions would be used to repay the TMF. There could also be project-related savings. So if you're able to go to a less costly platform, those lower operating costs would generate savings that you would be able to use to repay the TMF. And then you could do something where you're able to charge different parts of your department or agency a little bit to fund your payback if the solution helps all of those different parts of the agency.
So we actually had a couple of questions too. Yeah. I just want to make sure we get them.
I have a question about the payback structure timeline.
Yes.
Is there a specific timeline? And also, is there an APR? Is it one-to-one payback?
That's a really good question. So to your first question about how the payback must be structured, the way that it works is you have to make your first repayment to the TMF within 1 year of your first transfer. And you have to make your last repayment to the Technology Modernization Fund within 5 years of your last transfer. And so the payback schedule will really depend on the transfer schedule for that particular project. And that's another area where if you want to kick over some ideas with our PMO, we're available to help.
So you're saying that you don't just show up with a giant check, present it, and then you get like a leg cuff on you that in 1 year, if you do not present that entire amount back, everyone's in trouble. But it's all flexible.
Right, it's very flexible, and we can work with the agency on how much they have to repay each year to align to when those project savings emerge or when other changes to the budget can be made. And so that's an area where we know that agencies have a lot of questions, and where talking about the specific project will help us give the best answer.
Speaking of questions, in the corner.
All right.
One of the other questions that comes up on the funding side is in a environment of shrinking administrative budgets. While we believe we can find cost savings and offsets, our concern is that as our admin budget keeps shrinking, those offsets are going to be eaten up in the cuts. And how can we be comfortable that we'll have enough budget money over the next 5 years to repay?
That's a really good point. And so what I would share is that the Office of Management and Budget is a very strong partner in this effort, a very strong leader in this effort, I would even say, and that we're working directly with the resource management officers of the agencies that apply and are considered for funding to ensure that they are aware of this project and the effect that it will have on the agency's out-year budget. And so one of the instructions OMB gives in their guidance about reimbursement is that you need to build that repayment into your out-year budget, and then we would be working with OMB and with your agency to ensure that that funding was available to you for repayment.
So it sounds like this isn't like a big game of gotcha, that people are working with agencies on this to make it work.
Exactly, and we are very hopeful that in addition to all of those efforts, by allowing for payback over multiple years, we're also making it easier for agencies to repay the fund, because as you mentioned, you don't have to repay it in one lump sum. And so that gives agencies a lot of flexibility as well.
Yes, sir. And then pass him the microphone to the gentleman in the Capitals jersey.
Yeah, it's a one-to-one, right? There's not interest.
So that's a good question, and I'm sorry, Christine, that I didn't get to that one in my original response. There's going to be a small fee to support our program management office and the administration of the fund, but it won't be an interest payment. It'll just be to cover our administrative costs as well. And we're working with OMB to lock in the final percentage, but we're working to keep it as low as we can by running a lean PMO, lean and mean PMO, I guess I would say, and working to provide something to those agencies in the form of that direct technical support throughout your project, so you're getting something in return for that fee.
Any other questions before we, oh, see, I knew. I mean, you know it's leading me when you've got Emma on your team over here.
Yeah.
Keeping her busy. So what if the project ends up not succeeding? Is the agency still responsible to pay it back?
That's a really good question, and I'll respond to it by talking a little bit more about that incremental transfer model. And so we'll be working with agencies to structure the transfers to their agency to support the project tied to those project milestones. And so that's part of the agile methodology where you do the sprints, where you do the short-term increments, and then you move on to the next one once you reach your milestones or toll gates. And so through that model, we are hopeful that by structuring the milestones in a way that shows that the project is on track, we would be able to identify that a project was slipping a little bit before it reached a critical milestone and make interventions to adjust. And if a project wasn't able to get to that next incremental milestone, it wouldn't get that next round of funding. We would either restructure it or cut it off. And so in that way, we're helping the agencies minimize their exposure, limiting the amount that they have to repay the TMF so that we're not throwing good money after bad or setting the agency up for a bill that they cannot pay. That being said, if you receive a transfer from the Technology Modernization Fund, you're required to pay it back whether or not your program delivers on those savings. And so we would be working with the agencies to make sure those projects were successful, but the agencies have that skin in the game in terms of requiring that payback once you've received the transfer.
But you are working with them incrementally on it. And again, because we often get questions on this, it's not like a giant novelty check is given and then like a leg monitor. And if something fails along the way, the full amount is due.
Right, exactly.
All right, awesome. Is there any other questions on that before we go through?
All right, thank you. All right. Okay, and speaking of milestones, Section 3. This is where you outline your project plan, including those key project milestones and any relevant metrics. So what we want to see here is a mini project plan. What are the different stages of your project? How do they tie back to that funding that you need from the Technology Modernization Fund? And what are you going to be able to deliver within that increment? And all of this is information to show the board that you really do have a plan for this project, and you have also been thinking about the specific structure that we're requiring, where it's incremental milestones that trigger your transfer from the fund. And so what we really like to see here are some of those details about the different stages, information about how much money you need for each transfer, and then also what will you be able to deliver in terms of the project within that increment. And as I shared, the board is particularly interested in projects that can deliver part of their project within the first year. And so I would be thinking about that as I wrote my project plan. What could I show the board that I could deliver in the first year as part of this project plan schedule? Any questions on this one?
No, a year sounds like a good amount of time, actually, to move forward. And actually, again, we have no questions so far coming. Oh, right when I say that, questions start coming in online. Just a reminder again, because people in the room are tearing it up and asking some great stuff. But if you're out there, please make sure that you ask questions. And also just a reminder that if you're press wanting an interview, just email press@gsa.gov, and they're going to be able to handle you from there. Yep, we've got another question over here.
Is there a limit on the duration of the project? 1 year, 4 years, 5 years?
That's a good question. There is not a limit on the duration of the project. I would say that what we've heard from the board is they like seeing projects that can deliver within the first year. And then as we talked about the repayment schedule, you know, you've sort of got 5 years from your last transfer to complete the project. And so I would say, you know, we're open to projects of different length, but most projects have been definitely under 10 years, closer to 5, and some even shorter than that. So something to think about as you're developing your proposal, but there's no hard requirement.
For projects that may be, again, multi-year and have multiple components, if you are seeking perhaps funding for one piece of a larger project, how would you suggest accounting for that? Do you want to know just about the small initiative, or would you want to know how it fits into a larger effort?
That is a really great question. And I think a really great way to think about these projects is telling the board a little bit about your longer term effort and then actually going in with a request for a smaller increment. And you know, if you're able to get funding for increment 1 of your longer term project, you can also have the option of coming back and trying to get some funding for increment 2 or increment 3. And so I think that that would be a really great way to sort of tell the board the story of your longer term project plan to modernize your technology, as well as your tactical solution for a particular problem today.
All right, so we actually have a few questions online now, and because we specifically asked for them, we'll just pause for a second and go.
Yeah.
Some of these actually already were addressed, but that's okay.
Yeah.
We're going through it. So Evan asks, what is the typical dollar amount or dollar cost of a project? Like, what's that sweet spot you talk about?
So the board awards that they have just made were between 10 and 20 million, and we consider those to be larger awards. I would say, you know, especially now that we've made those 3 large awards, we would be giving agencies some guidance that, you know, with $55 million left, maybe think about in that $2 to $10 million range. And within that range, that's a project that probably has some good results within that first year and where the agency is going to be able to support payback. But like we've talked about previously, there's no formal limit on what it needs to be. 2 to 10 million is just what I consider that sweet spot.
All right. Actually, this is kind of a dual part question because a lot of the talk, and I remember one of my first questions that I had for you was, like, who is this for? Is this just for civilian agencies? Can DoD participate, the intelligence community? Can classified projects go through? And what was the short answer you gave on that?
Yeah, so the statute that we have gives pretty broad authority for us to work with different federal agencies, and we're available to check that with RGC to make sure that you are covered. But the Department of Defense can submit proposals, and we can also support classified systems as well. We would just need to work with the agency to make sure we were protecting that information appropriately.
Of course. Actually, somebody came up with a good idea. So they were saying how it sounds like this might not be the venue for the most high risk projects that obviously might have high rewards, but there's still a high risk of failure. And there's asking, is there any ideas around having a relationship to kick over projects to organizations like DARPA or other organizations in government as far as like a wider pipeline, or is it too early in the process, would you say?
That's a really good question. I would say that I think that there are opportunities for us to partner across the government if we see some of those really great ideas that just aren't a great fit for our program, and would be working as much as we could to refer them to the right community for review, and that we would hope that maybe those other communities would do the same thing for us. If they got a COBOL code conversion that wasn't quite right for their program, they could send that over to us as well.
All right, so the dam is broken online, and so we'll start going through some of these. If a project is under 500,000, will it be dismissed outright? Like when you talked about the sweet spot being around that area, so what if something's 500,000?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer is no, it would not be dismissed outright. However, we would want to work very closely with that agency to make sure that the Technology Modernization Fund was the right solution for that project. Because for an amount of that size, that's considered a very small project. And like we talked about a little bit about our fee, that some of those smaller projects, we might be able to find a different solution within the agency's budget. If the board is very excited about the idea, we can work with the agency leadership to perhaps find a different solution. Yeah,
because small things have, big things have small beginnings.
Right.
Especially in innovation.
And I should also say that we know for some of our smaller agencies, $500,000 is actually a lot of money. And so I should have said that if $500,000 is a lot of money for your agency, I would say that's a proposal that you should still consider sending in.
Because it's all about the impact, really.
Right, exactly. And also about that we were designed as a sort of finance mechanism to help agencies finance modernization projects. And so some agencies would actually need financing for a $500,000 project. But if your agency is on the larger side, that might be something where you could finance it internally if you just got the support.
Could that also be an opportunity to work together across agencies? Because if something is smaller in that relative size to the agency, but it's something, like you said, a nugget that could help other agencies, couldn't, like if they talk to you, be like, where could we find other agencies that could team together on this?
I think that's a great idea. I think that seeing agencies come together on different proposals and ideas for solutions to shared problems would be very exciting and something we would work very hard to support. And that I think that's a great suggestion, that if you're an agency that has this problem and you think that you have an approach, could you talk to your peers who might have a similar problem and see if they would be interested in supporting the implementation of a shared solution.
Yeah. And that's something like an invitation to everyone. We have our government-wide listservs and communities around emerging technology that have, you know, every government agency is essentially represented on it. So please use these resources that we have. If you have an idea, share it, and you could use GSA's networks government-wide to maybe to be able to matchmake on that. No one's alone in this process. All right, is there any more questions in the room, or shall we continue? No, I think we're good.
All right, section 4. Section 4 is where you share what will make your project successful. So some of the things that you could share with the board about what you think will make your project successful could include your high-level agency support for the effort. In addition, you could talk about the strength of your team, including any agency digital experts, acquisition experts, or ongoing projects that you have right now. The preparedness to begin executing this project, how ready are you to go? This would be a great place to share if you have a pilot project either completed or in the works, or if you have a minimum viable product already developed. And so that's another one of the things that the board has really liked to see, is that the agency has done some initial investigation into the technical solution to find out if it will work, and are interested in hearing about the results of those pilots before they fund additional increments. And so that would be also something to think about in your project plan, if that's not already part of it, is could you deliver a pilot project or a minimum viable product as part of your project plan, rather than barreling forward to your full solution.
Yeah.
Any other relevant factors that will demonstrate the likelihood of project success. So if this is a customer-facing platform or a citizen-facing platform, what change management strategies are you implementing to increase adoption?
Yeah.
Or what testing are you going to be able to do to ensure that your platform is performing in the way that you want? How are you going to work inside of the agency to make the changes that you need to get that solution adopted? And so I think in this section, this is really your chance to trumpet the success that your agency has had, or the different things that you think will make your project successful. And it's okay to be proud of what your project can do and be proud of the team that you have to deliver it. This is a great opportunity to share about what you have on hand to accomplish the project. Any questions?
Yes, somebody asked, so how should an agency think about savings that are not accrued in IT, but in the program area budget itself? And if those savings are through increased productivity, such as moving lower value to higher value work, et cetera. I think, again, there's a lot of breakdown of that budget, and people are focusing on the payback and what we really mean by program savings.
Right, that's a really good question. So I'm going to talk about the first example first, which is an IT investment that saves money in another part of the agency. We actually have the flexibility to have the transfer from the TMF go to the agency's IT budget, and the repayment to the Technology Modernization Fund come from a different budget, perhaps an operations or salaries and expenses budget.
Okay.
So we would work with the agency to structure the repayment so that the repayment comes from the part of the agency that is receiving those savings and those benefits. I would say in the example of improved efficiency on the part of the staff, where they're able to move from more routine manual work to higher value analysis, or perhaps other types of higher value work, we would want to talk about whether or not that project would be a good fit for our model, because the agency would still be on the hook to pay it back. And so if there's not actual savings in terms of dollars in the bank that are available to repay the TMF, that might be a project where a different solution for funding is the right approach. That being said, we want to talk with agencies about what they're planning to do and kick around these discussions about those particular projects to make sure that we're giving advice tailored to those specific projects and that specific agency situation.
Awesome. Is there any more questions before we proceed?
All right. We've got one more section, 5, last one. This is where you tell the board why the TMF is the right funding source for your project and how this project will generate the shared knowledge. And so this goes to the point we were just talking about is, you know, why is the TMF the right resource for this project? And so for that example we talked about the $500,000 project, this is where you would tell the board why the TMF is the right solution, even for what that would be considered a smaller project in most instances. This would be also where you would share where your maybe robotics or process automation project is the TMF is the right solution for that project, even if it won't have the savings. And what I would say is that even if the agency doesn't have savings to pay it back, the ability to break the repayment up over a period of years gives the agencies more flexibility in how they pay for the things that they want to do that may not necessarily generate direct dollar savings, and that is actually something that saves an agency money in a single year by breaking it up over multiple years. Yeah,
because something, as you know, that we hear from agencies all the time is these brilliant ideas on things that will, you know, fundamentally transform and impact citizen services, cost savings. And they're like, we just need some Kickstarter or something to get us going on that. And it sounds like if that's the type of thing that agencies need, they should be looking at TMF.
And so you could also share here a little bit about how using the Technology Modernization Fund can help your project move faster or do more work within a shorter period of time. So perhaps there's a project that's funded in an out-year budget or planned for an out-year budget, and if you were able to get the funding from the Technology Modernization Fund, you would be able to implement sooner and pay it back once those resources arrive. That would be a good thing to share in this section as well as in the repayment section. You could also share about perhaps that you could do 2 phases of a project within the first year instead of having to do 1 phase 1 year and 1 phase the next year because of the way that your appropriations are structured. And so telling the story about why the Technology Modernization Fund is the right funding source for your project is a really important way to show the board that you've thought through all the options that you have and selected the best one for your project.
It's fantastic. I think that's, is that the entire section?
Yeah.
So we've now broken down line by line the entire template for the TMF proposal. And there are questions. Yes, sir. No. Because then you'll.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for walking through all those 5 sections. I had a question whether the board equally weights each individual section or if they consider one or more sections more important than any other one.
You know what, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to save that question for when we bring the Federal Acquisition Service Commissioner, Alan Thomas, up to the front of the room and maybe have him answer that from the perspective of a board member.
You know what, this is actually a great opportunity. If Alan, would you like to join us now? And we could also, once he has to leave us, we can still continue answering all the questions that we've got.
No, I wore my Friday shoes, but you wore your Friday shoe. We have different Friday shoe collection, huh? Yeah. All right. How you doing?
Thank you so much for joining us.
You want to take the weighting question?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely not like the process we make vendors go through to win work with the federal government, right? It's not that structure. I mean, it's much more like a traditional, someone would come and pitch to get venture capital money, right? So we're thinking about all the things we're asking about, but there's not a that's worth 10% and that's worth 20%, right? So it's kind of a more holistic evaluation of the proposal, the financials, the people that are actually delivering it. You know, so kind of would we make a bet on this team to get this thing done, right? It's a little. It's not as cut and dried as like a federal proposal.
That's great. And so, Alan, I think you wanted to kick off your appearance at this event with a few words, and so I'll give you that chance now if you'd like.
Sure. So, we made the first 3 awards, or they were announced yesterday, right? So pretty exciting. 3 sort of, different, really diverse projects, different parts of the government. There's still an opportunity to get in, to get good proposals in. We know some folks maybe have been taking a little more time, kind of thinking through, refining their proposals. We're really looking forward to seeing more from people. And I think it sounds like I just sort of popped in for the last couple minutes here, but in terms of the finances and kind of changing the way the government allocates its capital, while the fund is only $100 million and we're hoping for 150 next year, it really is revolutionary and kind of changing how things get funded. And if we pick the right kind of projects and the right kind of people and we have success, I think it's the sort of thing that the Congress and this administration and subsequent administrations will continue to fund and find value. And so it could be kind of cool to be in on the first wave of that.
Especially now that people have seen that it works. It's been rewarded and stuff. That was really good timing before our questions and answer webinar this morning.
Exactly. And so, Alan,
was that planned, Liz? Did we plan it like that?
I wish.
No, because we wouldn't have had the Stanley Cup win so late last night before the certain one.
Yeah. And so, Alan, I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what is your favorite part of being on the Technology Modernization Board?
Sure. So really, I think two parts of that. One is I just like a good problem. And so every proposal that comes in is kind of, to me, like a little business school case study. And, the government, one of the cool things about working in the government is there are lots of really challenging problems that the government tries to solve that obviously we get help from the private sector, but they're not the same kind of problems that you face in the private sector. So just seeing that diversity of the proposals that come in and kind of the challenges is very cool to me, and then trying to unpack it. The other thing that's great about the board is it's an interesting, smart, diverse set of people, diverse in thought, talent, and approach. And it's been just, sometimes it's kind of cool to hang out with smart people who think about things a little bit differently than you do. So that, personally, that's been cool for me.
All right. And so we have a bunch of team representatives here in the room. We've got more on the call. If you wanted to give them one piece of advice for writing their initial project proposals, what would that be?
Get to the point quickly, right? So don't bury, if you're a reporter, don't bury the lead, right? If you think you have 3 or 4 really impactful sentences that talk about outcomes, that should be right up front.
Great. And so as you mentioned, the Technology Modernization Board has awarded $45 million, but we're still looking for proposals, right?
We are. We have $55 million in dry powder. So absolutely still looking for proposals.
Right. And very excited to see Congress support our out-year budget request. We requested $210 million and we saw $150 in the House mark. So very excited that we are hopefully receiving additional appropriations in the out year.
Seemed like a nice vote of confidence.
Definitely. All right. Do we have any questions in the room or on the web?
There's actually, the only thing somebody asked is, could we briefly describe some of those 3 different awards, like who they were awarded to? A lot of this information is available online, probably being incredibly widely reported this morning. But what are we able to say what those agencies are? Because I think there's actually a slide for, it's right behind us.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I didn't turn it around.
Yep.
So we pulled this from OMB's press release on the first 3 awards. The Department of Energy award was for a cloud email migration to the cloud. Currently, the Department of Energy does not have an enterprise-wide email solution, and they want to move to one, and we're helping them do that with this award. For the Department of Housing and Urban Development, they have an old mainframe running legacy code, COBOL code, and we're going to help them move to a modern programming language and also a cloud solution. And then for the United States Department of Agriculture project, their secretary has been very supportive of reworking their citizen-facing platforms to focus on what the individual citizen would need and not in the way the agency is structured in terms of those different silos. And we're going to be doing some funding to support that effort in enhancing that citizen-facing portal. So if you think about it, it's like making agency operations better with that cloud email solution, getting off of legacy technology and onto new and more secure modern platforms with the HUD project, and then delivering that value to the citizen in terms of improving that citizen-facing platform. So I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add on that.
I think maybe just one thing I would add, I think Energy did a particularly good job of this in their presentation. They had a little story when they came in to actually present that talked about the impact of making the change. And that really helped crystallize it for the board in terms of why that was, why that was beneficial. Particularly when you get to the oral presentation phase, I think that's important to have a little vignette, right? That gives us a sense for why this is important.
Kind of exciting. I often see this referred to as like the Shark Tank approach, and I'm imagining just being on the board and having these presentations and differences in the stories and the mechanisms really making the difference, bringing that to the table. It's just so unique in the federal government to have this now.
Right, and so we also think it's pretty similar to the venture capital experience. We talked about that a little bit as well, where you're really making a pitch to a board for them to award funding to your project. And so telling those stories, making it a creative and engaging presentation. Hey, maybe we can do this again for projects that are in phase 2, and give some advice on that later on.
Oh, we actually have a question.
Just in terms of speaking of a pitch and telling the story, who do you recommend if you make it to that stage as part of the pitch team?
Yeah, we love to see the people who are going to actually do the work. So in keeping with the venture capital model, part of the bet is people bet. And so it's great to bring someone from leadership in, but we also really want to see the people who are going to execute on the project. So I remember in particular when HUD came in, there was a woman who's the technical lead on the project, and she answered a number of questions and played a role in the presentation. And it was, that was great to see her. So a mix is good, but definitely bring some folks who are going to do the work.
Another part of that in-person pitch is questions from the board. And so we also recommend the people who can answer those technical or finance questions come along for the presentation to help ensure that your team is able to answer those questions to the board.
So we actually have another really good question, and I know your time is limited here, but so somebody said and this is about, again, so our friend Dan Green at the Navy is basically asking about interagency proposals, and we're getting that question a lot, and I know we addressed it a bit before, but is this something that the board could be looking at? Is, again, if one agency sees a need, but then they could partner with other agencies and bring it together, is that something that you think would be attractive?
It's one of the criteria we're looking for, right? So if you said, hey, I've got 2 or 3 other agencies that have a shared need, and you can bring them together and put a coherent proposal, that's going to carry a little more weight with the board.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Again,
Alan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Liz.
All right, I'll take the microphone. That's okay. We'll pass it on just because what we'll do now, and thank you again, Alan, for joining us, is make sure that we go through all the questions that we have before we start individual consultations and talking about proposals. So is there anything else that you wanted to go through on your slides or anything?
No, that's it. Just ready for some more questions.
All right, so right now we have all the questions answered online for right now. Is there anything else? Because if not, we could actually end the live stream and then go directly into workshop portion of this, which is individualized consultations, questions, working on proposals. I think we might have gotten everything, and actually in a good clean hour. So that being said, thank you so much for joining us and coming out this morning. We had a packed room despite an online only workshop, which I think, again, underscores the importance of this.
Right.
Any other closing words to close us out here, Liz?
No, just thank you so much for your participation, and we really are looking forward to your proposals, so get them in.
Yep, and keep the questions coming. And again, if you are the press and would like to have questions about any of this, just email press@gsa.gov, and they're going to be happy to help you. Now, from all of us here, and also want to thank behind the scenes our producer, CC today, who's always behind the cameras at DigitalGov University, making this happen. From all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Now let's get to work.